The plane hummed steadily above the desert sands, sunlight glinting off its polished wings. Inside, Tony Stark lounged across a leather seat, drink in hand, laughter echoing through the cabin. Weapons deals, press tours, and charisma. This was the rhythm of his life. Until, with a thunderous boom, the world flipped upside down. Shrapnel tore through metal and flesh, lights exploded in his vision, and the laughter died away. Tony woke in darkness, pain scorching his chest. His first frantic breath was shallow. Moving felt like being scraped raw from the inside. He tore at the gauze on his chest, expecting to find something, anything, anchoring him to life. Instead, he found bandages, a faint, throbbing ache, and nothing else. The face above him was not Yinsen, but a Taliban guard barking threats in a language Tony barely understood. There was no arc reactor glowing faint and blue in his chest. There was only the relentless beat of time and a terror that went bone deep. The days in captivity blended into one another. There was no arc reactor to keep him alive or illuminate the darkness. But the pain in his chest was an ever-present reminder of the shrapnel inching closer to his heart. Yinsen was still assigned as his caretaker. "You have to operate," Yinsen urged one night, voice urgent, "or the metal will kill you. We don't have the tools to take it out, and we have no way to power any sort of electromagnet strong enough to hold it back." Yinsen's eyes bristled with apology, haunted by helplessness. The 10 rings demanded their missile, but Tony, weak and feverish, could give them nothing but time. In that arid cave, he designed weapons, sketched equations with trembling hands, all to maintain the illusion that he was still the brilliant Tony Stark, the man with escape always up his sleeve. But as the hours devoured his strength, the facade slipped. Without the arc reactor, hope faded. Each day, the shrapnel's slow crawl grew more insistent. Some nights, Tony coughed blood and pressed his palm over his heart, praying for another sunrise. Yinsen, desperate, scavenged whatever he could: old medical equipment, weak car batteries, wiring ripped from detonators. He fashioned a crude electromagnet, but it sputtered and died, barely strong enough to hold a paperclip, let alone the metal threatening Tony's life. When Tony looked at his reflection, a bruised and wasted genius, he realized brilliance wasn't always enough. Sometimes, it took a miracle. 10 days in, the pain reached a breaking point. Tony awoke on a blood-soaked cot, breathless and shaking. Yinsen pressed a cool cloth to his forehead, his hands trembling. "You're dying, Tony." For a moment, the old Tony tried to laugh it off, but the reality was undeniable. "So this is it, the end of genius," he wheezed. "No, not the end," Yinsen insisted, voice low. "You can do something before you go." In those final hours, Tony made a choice, not to escape, not to save himself, but to ensure his weapons never hurt another innocent life. Yinsen helped him pen a letter, a confession to be smuggled out, exposing the Stark weapon pipeline and the chaos it unleashed. The two of them sabotaged as many missile schematics as possible, erasing hard drives and destabilizing fuses. The escape plan, the famous Mark I Iron Man armor, never made it off the page. With no arc reactor to power it, the iron suit was nothing more than a concept, sketched on the cave wall and left unrealized. Instead, Tony and Yinsen focused on sabotaging every weapon in the encampment, rigging them to self-destruct when next used. The 10 rings eventually discovered the sabotage. Tony and Yinsen were dragged from the cave as explosions began to ripple through the camp. Yinsen did not survive. Tony, emaciated and weak, was left bleeding in the sand after a furious interrogation. But his act set off a chain reaction, literally and figuratively. American troops, drawn by the chaos, stormed the base and found Tony alive but barely conscious, clutching Yinsen's letter of confession to his chest. Back in the States, Tony became a different man. The surgery to remove the shrapnel was touch and go, but without the arc reactor's unique magnetic field, doctors could not extract all the fragments. Tony recovered physically, a shell of the man he once was, but without the chest-deep pain, the near death always stalking him. He stood on a stage at a press conference, haggard and somber, the world waiting for the old Tony's bravado. Instead, He closed his eyes and said the words that would echo across the industry. Effective immediately, Stark Industries will cease all weapons manufacturing. The room erupted, stunned. But something had changed. Without his own miraculous rebirth, Tony struggled to find his purpose. He poured his resources into medical innovation, working feverishly with world-class surgeons to develop safer ways to extract shrapnel, opening rehabilitation centers for war victims, changing lives, but always feeling the boundaries of his frail body. The world spun on. There was no Iron Man blasting through the skies above Manhattan. No flying suit, no super-heroic redemption, no grand gestures of power and hope. Afghanistan remained a scar on Tony's soul, a place he'd left behind, but never escaped. But even in this arc-reactorless reality, ripples spread. Stark's confession led to the exposure of illicit weapons trading on a global scale. Yinsen's testimony, attached to the letter, inspired uprisings in villages scarred by war. The Avengers never assembled, but the people Tony helped, surgeons, amputees, engineers, built their own networks of strength and support. Years later, Tony stood before a glass wall, watching a team fit prosthetics to a veteran's wounds. His reflection stared back at him. Older, scarred, no chest light, but eyes burning with something new. Not the fire of genius, but gratitude, for the chance to do good, one fragile day at a time. In a world without Iron Man, Tony Stark saved lives not with arc reactors or armored suits, but with the courage to face his own fragility, and the resolve to ensure the world's wounds would slowly begin to heal.